episode 95, All the Everything Podcast. I'm Billy, and that is Tim.
Woo woo! Welcome back, guys, from the summer series. We are back to full-length episodes, and we get to talk as much as we like. Me and Billy have been dying, literally, because we love our banter at the beginning. We love, because a lot of times we won't talk before we get on. If we start
Right.
to, I'm like, shut up, wait, just wait, because if not, we'll just sit here and joke for an hour.
Right.
But I'm super pumped so we can actually talk and get some things out. I've missed that so much, Billy.
Yeah, the summer short series, we're like, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Yep.
Yes.
So.
Always thank you, ma'am. This is what happened.
This is what happens.
So I'm ready to get back to our normal format. We've got a great episode for you guys today. But before all that's going on, like, what's the latest and greatest, Billy? What's been going on with you, man?
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know if you know this or not, but since the last time you saw me, and we'll talk more about the last time you saw me on another, that needs its own episode. And it'll have that here very soon. But
can't wait
since
for that.
Since the last time you saw me, and then the girls started back to school, I started this challenge to myself, because for the last year, I have been gaining and losing the same 20 pounds over and over, and it's been driving me crazy. Like, I can't seem to break like 330 pounds, right? And so, like, I'd get up, and then, like, after our last trip, of course, that's with everything involved with that, like eating and drinking and everything like that, and then of course the summer, not being able to go walk like I need,
because you're home with the girls.
Yeah, because I'm home with the girls.
You don't have that alone time. Yeah,
exactly. And I tried to go walking with them, not this past summer, but the summer before. And Lily ended up with a blister the size of a quarter on the back of her heel, and I had to carry her. It was 100 degrees in the sun, and I had to carry her 2 miles back to the car, and it was not fun. So we didn't walk. I didn't go walking this summer, and so I was starting to creep back up, and I was back in the 50s, and I'm like, oh my gosh, hold up, wait up, nope. stop. And so I started this challenge to myself, and this is the most random thing ever, because I have never been into Pokemon.
Yeah.
It came out when I was like maybe a junior in high school, and then you got college. And so I never watched like the cartoons, or, I missed that kind of that phase. But for the last couple of months, man, I've been on my algorithm just getting all this like Pokemon card content, like card shows and different things like that. That's been crazy. And I've really like,
those things are so addictive to watch.
Yeah. And so I watched the whole thing, and I'm like, oh. And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, I loved collecting sports cards in high school. Loved it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go buy me a pack. And so I did. And I got hooked. Now, the problem with that is it's really easy to open like 10 packs in like 5 minutes. And then you're like, And so I'm like, okay, so I have this weight issue that I'm dealing with. I need to get focused. B, now I have this new hobby that's really expensive, and I don't want my wife mad at me. How do I fix these things? Right. And so I came up with the challenge to myself that because I started collecting. Okay. So let me right here for the camera. I started collecting this series, Chaos Rising. It's one of the newer.
Bring it closer to the camera real quick.
It's one of the.
Give me a little
focus. There we go.
Okay.
It's one of the newer sets, and so I bought like a big box of them, like the trainer box, and so I started. I was like, I want to collect one of every single card in this set. They call it like a Grandmaster set, and so that was my challenge. And so I was like, okay, what we're gonna do to slow it down.
Wait, time out real quick though. Yeah, how many cards are in the Grandmaster set?
220 cards.
Woo!
And that's a lot, because there's regular cards, there's reverse hollows and hollows of those regular cards, and then there's
Yeah.
special rare cards and like really high value dollar cards and stuff like that, full illustrations and stuff. And so, yeah, 220 total based off my research, and I want every single one of them. And currently, just to give you a heads up, I'm at 136 now.
Oh,
I
wow.
got 136 of them. So to slow things down, to get my fitness back on track, I gave myself a challenge that I am going to walk a 5K. And when I do, I get to open one pack.
Okay.
And so, basically it's been one pack per day since the girls. It sounds like I'm a smoker.
These are the 2 packs a day, folks.
But and so, but every single day I have walked 3.1 miles, like focused, like nonstop. And then I would come home and I'd film it, and then I'm documenting it all on my personal social media. So with all that, since the girls have been in school, I am down over 20 pounds since the last time you saw me.
Nice. Good job, my friend.
Thank you. And so, yeah, I've been getting after it really hard.
How many days a week are you walking?
I'm walking every single day. Every single day.
7 days a week?
All 7 days. Yesterday, I walked 3 miles in my living room, just around in circles. 3 miles, because the girls were
drive by, seeing you look like a lunatic, just walking circles in your house.
Yep, just walking around, circle. Yeah, because the girls were home. Michelle went to the movies with her mom, and so I knocked it out right there. The girls were, playing Roblox and talking to friends and stuff like that. And so, yep, just around in the living room nonstop.
Nice, good job.
Got it done. Got to do what you got to do. So, yeah, that's kind of been my story since the last time you saw me. So, super exciting, and I'm getting hooked on this hobby, and I'm also getting back after it and walking and staying focused, because when you walk, you eat better. I've noticed that, because you put the time and the effort into it. And so
absolutely.
You eat better, and
you have to have one to go with the other, right?
Exactly.
You can't just be one thing all the time.
Right.
Now you can eat better and not exercise. Definitely, you can.
Absolutely.
But the one feeds the other each time.
It does. It really does. Yeah. It really does. And so, that's kind of the big thing that's been going on in my life. So that's I know you've had some pretty big things too, huh?
Yeah. So we talked about this before. I went on Adventures by Disney with Leslie for her 50th birthday. We went to London, Paris, and we got home on the very next night. I was scheduled to teach my fitness class at the Y, and I didn't want to miss because I'm gone a lot. So I went that night, taught it, and with about 5 to 10 minutes left in the class, I felt something in my knee happen. I didn't know what it was, because we've talked about this before. Sometimes if you work out a lot or you do stuff, sometimes you feel like you tweak something, but not necessarily do any damage. So I had no idea what it was. But as the night went on, like I was leaving, I was like gimping outside and whatever. I know we've talked about this on previous podcasts. So after a bunch of tests, they determined that I had torn my meniscus, had some cartilage holes or something, and being old man McGee, had some arthritis in my knee too, which was not making things any better.
Right.
So I just had surgery on August 7th. So I'm just a couple days past 2 weeks pre-op right now. Yeah. Everything went well. All the stitches and things are out. It's getting better. It's just still sore.
Sure.
And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking I'm ready to go. Like, I'm mentally ready. I've been waiting for this moment to get past this, because I've been sitting around prior to the whole. It was like over a month or so, but I had to wait till I had surgery.
Right.
And that was about ready to lose my mind, because exercise is so good for your mental health. Like, amazing for your mental health.
It really is.
And that's been like the thing that's run like side by side with me through my mental health journey. Not only getting on the right medication, doing the right things, but also exercise has always made my mind stronger and better, and really helped my mental health. So without it, it's been kind of like a downer a little bit.
Sure.
I get like, even when I'm working out, if I'm driving by somebody like walking around the lake, I have instant FOMO. I'm like, God, I wish I was out. This is after me already like running 5 miles for the day. I still have FOMO for people working out. And Leslie's like, I don't understand that. I never have FOMO for people working out. So not everyone has that same feeling, but especially it's been magnified to me because during this time, I haven't been able to work out. I was able to do a couple things here and there. And then I see people doing exercise, and I see Billy doing his challenges and stuff, and
Yep.
I'm just
I'm rubbing it in
dying.
his face. I'm rubbing it in his face.
And he texts me every day. He's like, "What's up?" And he's like dropping lbs on the scale, open up Pokemon cards. But with that being said, I just spent last week in Michigan in Grand Haven. We go up there. Matter of fact, this was our 25th anniversary of 25 years in a row.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. Kind of reminiscing, going through that. But this place is such a chill place, and it's like a real walkable town everywhere you go. So I was able to get steps in every single day. Probably got more movement than I would have if I was at home,
Mhm.
because I probably would have been laying around, resting my knee or whatever. But forced me to get out there. It was kind of like PT without doing PT. And
Yeah.
the last day I pushed it a little bit too far. I was averaging just to try to stay under about 5,000 steps, not
Yeah.
doing too much crazy. But the last day I was just beautiful, and I did like almost 10,000 steps. I could feel
Ooh.
a big difference. It was pretty sore.
Yeah.
But with that being said, after we get off the podcast today, I'm going for my first walk outside. I cannot wait. I can't
Yeah.
go crazy, but
Sure.
I can't wait to get that body in motion and staying in motion like I always was used to. But with the other thing, with when you're injured and you're sitting around and maybe if you're sick or whatever, all you want to do is like have comfort food. You know what I mean? Not
Mhm.
great food for you. So I feel like in this zone of time since the surgery, I've had a lot of crappy food. I haven't been able to
Mhm.
move. I went on vacation. I've gained weight. I can see it in my body. I see it in my face. So it's driving me crazy, and I know I can't do anything about it crazy right now. I have to kind of wait through the process. The guy told me 4 to 6 weeks for full
Yeah.
recovery, and I'm just a couple days after 2.
Yeah.
But
You're
I've got
halfway
full
there.
range of motion on my knee. Like I feel like I'm progressing really well.
Yeah.
Um, just not fast enough for my for my taste. I just wanted to be
Right.
so much faster, but
Uh,
I think God's given me the lesson to like be still, know I'm
uh-huh.
God, be patient,
Mhm.
which is not easy all the time.
No.
But
No.
I mean, yeah. So yeah. So that's what's been going on lately. Like Billy said, we do have, I think next week we'll do an episode
Mhm.
for what we were talking about before. We want to share something with you guys, and it's so good. And there are some funny stories that you guys will be crying for sure to share with you guys. Um, now I'm wishing we did this today, but anyhow, we'll have it for you next week, right, Billy?
Yep. Yep. But we do have a really good one for you today. So it's
Oh,
really,
so good,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
good.
It's going to be a good one.
Um, yeah, we got a great episode for you. Let's not leave him hanging anymore, Billy.
Let's do it.
Well, there ain't nothing to it but to do it. Are you ready, my friend?
You better believe it. Let's get into all the everything, y'all.
We got it all, we got it all. Crimes, clues, rise and falls. So lock your doors, sit back, don't stress. Cause Tim and Billy dig into the evidence. From cold case files to alibis, they chase the clues and question lies. It's two guys talking way too loud about killers who thought they'd never get found. Welcome to the madness.
Well, welcome back to yet another amazing episode of All the Everything Podcast. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Tim Sawhook, and I'm joined by my band, Billy. I gotta catch 'em all parchman. How you doing today, brother?
Oh, brother, man. Doing good. Doing good. Got to catch them all. That's right.
Billy, what are we talking about today, buddy?
Well, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can tell that I am wearing my Batman garb. Now, Batman was or is, I think, one of the greatest detectives out there, right?
True.
And so we're not talking about Batman today, but we are going back into our true crime era.
Yes.
And we are focusing on some true crime stories that, you know, there was just one tiny mistake made that caused whoever or whatever to be caught. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today with our true crime series, One Tiny Mistake. With it being a true crime episode, I know I'm going to be talking about a serial killer, and with that comes, murder, and so it might not be for all ages. It's
Right.
And so just be cautious. Or if you struggle with things like that, you're not into it. Hey, thanks for listening so far. 20 minutes in, and we'll catch you next week. And so that's totally cool. Go back and listen to one of our other episodes. And we got
listen to some good news.
We got
It'll lift you up.
94 other ones. So go check out some good news. Awesome. But yeah, for today, true crime. So if you're into it, which I know a lot of y'all are, we get a lot of good responses with our true crime episodes. So this one is for y'all. So with that said, let's dive in, y'all. Okay, y'all ready for this?
Yes.
They said yes. They said yes. Okay.
I'm preaching from them. Yeah, come on now.
Come on.
Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. For more than 30 years, police in Wichita, Kansas were trying to answer one question. Who was BTK? They knew what he had done. They had letters he had written. They had evidence from his crimes. They even knew the name that he had chosen for himself. But they had absolutely no idea who the man behind that name actually was. And what makes this story so incredible is that after avoiding capture for decades, he was eventually identified because of one tiny mistake. Our story begins on January 15th, 1974, when 4 members of the Ontario family were found murdered inside their home in Wichita. Joseph and Julie Ontario and their 2 children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, had been killed. At this time, investigators had no idea that these murders would eventually become the beginning of one of the most infamous cases in Kansas history. Over the next several years, more murders followed, but there was something different about this killer. He didn't just want to commit the crimes and disappear. No, he wanted attention. He wanted the police to know about him, and maybe even more importantly, he wanted the public to know about him. He began sending letters to the newspaper and television stations describing his crimes and taunting investigators. Eventually, he gave himself a name. He called himself BTK, which stood for Bind, Torture, Kill. I'm not going to spend a lot of time describing the murders themselves because that's not really what makes this particular story so interesting. What matters is that while the entire city was trying to figure out who BTK was, the man behind the letters was living what appeared to be a completely normal life. His name was Dennis Rader. Now, Rader was married and had 2 children. He had served in the Air Force, worked several different jobs, and eventually became a compliance officer with the city of Park City, which was just right outside of Wichita. He had been involved with the Boy Scouts as a Cub Scout leader, and he was extremely active in his church. In fact, he eventually became president of the congregation at Christ Lutheran Church. Oh my goodness. And just think about that for a second. This is someone who had neighbors who knew him, coworkers who saw him regularly, people who sat beside him in church, and a family who lived in the same house with him. Meanwhile, investigators were desperately searching for one of the most notorious killers in the country, and nobody was connecting Dennis to BTK. And as the years went by, the killings eventually stopped, and so did most of BTK's communications. His final known murder happened in 1991, and then he just disappeared. Years passed without another murder being connected to him, and eventually the case grew cold. At that point, Dennis had basically got away with it. If he had simply lived the rest of his life quietly, there's no telling how long this mystery could have remained unsolved. Technology in the 1970s and 80s was nowhere near what it was today. Investigators had spent decades trying to identify him without any success. The problem was that Dennis apparently didn't just want to get away with his crimes. He wanted people to remember him. In 2004, a local newspaper published a story about the 30th anniversary of the Ontario murders. The article questioned what had happened to BTK and eventually raised the possibility that he might be dead or in prison for some unrelated crime. Apparently, BTK didn't appreciate being forgotten. Not long afterwards, a letter arrived to the Wichita Eagle. Inside was evidence connecting to one of his previous victims. After years of silence, BTK was announcing that he was still alive. This decision would eventually be the beginning of the end for Dennis Rader. He began communicating again, sending letters and packages and leaving messages for investigators around Wichita. The problem was that the world had changed dramatically since he had first began doing this in the 1970s. Security cameras were much more common. DNA testing had completely changed criminal investigations, and computers had created an entirely new category of evidence. Now, Dennis was still playing the same game he played decades earlier, but police now had a completely different set of tools. In January of 2005, BTK left investigators a package that eventually led them to Home Depot in Wichita. When police investigated, they had discovered something Rader apparently had not considered. The store had surveillance cameras. Investigators reviewed the footage and were able to see a dark-colored Jeep Cherokee that appeared to be connected to a person who had left this package. Now, the footage was not clear enough to identify the driver, so police still didn't know who BTK was. But they now had a small piece of the puzzle. Then Dennis did something that, looking back, was almost impossible to believe. He wanted to communicate with the police electronically. Now, more specifically, he wanted to send them information on a floppy disk. Now, for anyone younger that's listening that has actually never used one, a floppy disk was basically a small square-looking plastic disk that we would put in our computers to save files, before flash drives or iCloud storages, And so, I remember buying those little packs of them for school and
multicolored ones.
Multicolored, exactly.
Yeah, that was the jam. Yeah,
that's what we did. That's how we saved our stuff. You had a paper you needed to save and go print it off at the library. Doop, doop, doop. That's how we did it. Rader apparently understood enough about computers to know that sending a floppy disk might be risky. He was worried that investigators might somehow be able to trace it back to him. And so he asked them. That's right. Think about what I'm saying here, okay? A serial killer who had successfully hidden his identity for more than 30 years essentially asked the police who were trying to catch him whether a piece of evidence he was thinking about sending them could be used to identify him. So, yeah, he wanted the police to respond. No, not at all. He wanted the police to respond through a classified advertisement in the Wichita Eagle. If the disc could not be traced, they were supposed to tell him it was safe. So investigators agreed to play along. They placed a message in the newspaper telling him, hey, it's going to be okay. Sure, send it out. We can't tell who you are. And you know what?
Yep.
Dennis believed them. So on February 16th, 2005, a package arrived at KSAS TV in Wichita. Inside that was a purple floppy disk containing a document from BTK. But as far as he knew, he had simply created a file, saved it onto a floppy disk, and sent it to investigators after they assured him that, it couldn't be traced. But somewhere on that disk was a tiny piece of information that was about to unravel everything. So what do you think it was?
Well, from what I know, there are little things that record certain information. I'm not going to blow up your story, but
don't spoil this for us, Gene.
And the killer was, it's like the Scooby-Doo pulling the mask off. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what could possibly be hidden on a floppy disk that would allow investigators to take a serial killer that they've been searching for since the 70s and suddenly figure out his name? Well, when they examined the disk, they weren't just interested in the document that Rader had wanted them to read. A computer forensic investigator began looking for information connected to the file itself. And that's where they found the metadata. Now, metadata basically is information stored behind the scenes about a digital file. Depending on the program and the computer used, it can contain certain things about this file, like where it was created, when it was edited, and information about a person or organization that created it. Now, Dennis apparently had no idea that this information was still attached to this file.
Well, the police told him it was okay.
It was okay. Sure, send it
anything
on
about
in.
you.
Wink.
Yeah, big wink on it.
Wink. When investigators examined it, they found two clues. They found a first name, Dennis, and they found an organization, Christ Lutheran Church. That was it. Now, after 30 years of trying to figure out who BTK was, investigators suddenly had the name Dennis and the name of the church. And so they began searching. And it did not take long at all before they discovered that the president of the congregation at Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita was a man named Dennis Rader. But now the police had his name. And so they began looking into his life. Where did he live? Where did he work? What did he drive? Did anything about him connect to the information investigators already had? And very quickly, things started lining up. Remember that dark-colored Jeep Cherokee investigators had seen at the Home Depot? Police discovered that Jeep Cherokee was connected to the Rader family. That's a huge clue. But investigators still wanted to have something stronger before arresting him. They had spent decades trying to catch him, and they wanted to make absolutely sure that he was the man. That's when another advancement in technology entered the story. DNA. Investigators had biological evidence preserved from the original BTK crime scene, but they needed something to compare it to. Police obtained a warrant allowing them to test a medical sample that had previously been collected from his daughter. And the results showed that the person who left the DNA at the crime scene that BTK did originally, was a close family member to her. And at that point, all the pieces had come together. The floppy disk had given his name, the connection to the church, and all the metadata. And while the vehicle connected to the family was consistent to what investigators had seen on the surveillance footage, the DNA evidence provided the biological connection that they needed. And on February 25th, 2005, just 9 days after the floppy disk had arrived to the television station, police arrested Dennis Rader. And after more than 30 years, BTK had finally been caught. There are obviously a lot of disturbing parts about this story, but parts that have always fascinated me about just how unnecessary his mistake was.
You asked the police.
Yeah. Hey, can I send this? You promise? You promise you won't catch me if I send this to you? He had almost gotten away. No.
He gets a word. My name rhymes with Rennis. But they won't figure it out. Yeah.
They won't figure it out. Oh, but the real problem is he wanted the attention. He couldn't just let it be. But you know what? The police, yeah, you're good. Send it in. And so that, my friends, is the one tiny mistake that Dennis Rader made. And that is why BTK was captured. There you go.
Man. Let me, just to go back in time for good old Dennis, let me give you a date. September 4th, 1998 is when Google started. He sent that He sent that disc in 2005.
Yep.
Did he not maybe Google it? Can you trace a floppy disk?
Can you
Come
trace
on, Dennis.
Come on.
September 4th, 1998, you had Google already available to you, and you still had to ask the police.
Man,
that story's crazy because I know you didn't go into a lot of details on the murders, but the things that he did to people were just absolutely horrible.
Yes. And he was a Cub Scout leader and, the church president of the congregation and all this other stuff. He was sitting by people in pews that had no idea. No idea.
That's the insane part of the story, too. It's just like he couldn't get out of his own way. I'm glad he got caught. I'm not don't feel sorry for the guy by any stretch. But these people can't get away from their own egos. And thankfully they have these problems so we can catch them.
That's right.
Yeah, but I remember when that story broke, I didn't know much about it prior to, because there wasn't a lot of podcasts back then about these things, and
I
hadn't heard anything about it. But when they did that, now if you go out there, guys, there are so many documentaries about BTK. If you really want to know more details, more stuff that happened in the crimes, they share all of those things. But
absolutely.
But yeah, he was just an evil man. Well, Billy, that was, I hate to say really good, but it's very interesting, It's weird when you talk about true crime and everyone's like, oh my God, you got to check out this one. It's not because we love the crime. It's the fascination of the people who do these things. And the recognition that these monsters are out there and they're real, I think, is the part that draws people in. I mean, that's what it is for me. It's just, I find it very interesting. And then I also feel so bad when you hear about the victims and everything. It's just absolutely horrible stuff people got stuck in and had to deal with. So anyhow, family members afterwards, I'm sure they were all so happy that Dennis was captured. So
get some kind of form of closure there, some if any. So it's something.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So anyhow, thank you for that. So I'm going to get into mine. All right. So Billy, today I'm going to tell you about a man who terrified California. But here's what makes this story different. Okay. For most of this story, I'm not going to tell you his name because for decades, nobody knew it. Police didn't know. Victims didn't know. The FBI didn't know. And unbelievably, investigators didn't even initially realize that some of the crimes we're investigating in different parts of California were being committed by the same person. He would be given different names over the years. First, the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker, and eventually the Golden State Killer. But those names came later. Today, I want us to experience the story the way California experienced it, without knowing who is actually behind the mask. And Billy, while I'm telling you this story, I want you to think about one question. How did they finally catch him? One tiny mistake, right? Because this man was careful, extremely careful. He studied his victims. He studied neighborhoods. He understood police procedures. He knew how investigations work. And there's a reason for that is going to make the story even more disturbing. He committed crimes for years. Then suddenly, he stopped. Sound familiar?
Right.
And, with the investigators, 1 year became 5, 5 became 10, 20 became 30, and eventually investigators had to confront an awful possibility. Maybe he had died. Maybe he moved away, or maybe the monster they'd been hunting had been living among them the entire time. So, you talked about this before, like the people in the church with him, right? These are people who went to the grocery store. He was driving down the street. He was mowing his lawn, growing old, watching television, living his life, while the people whose lives he destroyed were still wanting to learn his name. And then, more than 4 decades after the nightmare began, investigators found him. Not because someone recognized him, not because he confessed, not because an eyewitness finally came forward. They found him because of something he had left behind decades earlier, something he probably never imagined could someday identify him. And when you hear how they did it, you may think about your own family tree the same way again. And so this is True Crime Part 4, One Tiny Mistake, the Golden State Killer. So our story begins in California in the 1970s. And before there was a Golden State Killer, there was a burglar. Beginning around 1974, the city of Visalia, California, began experiencing a bizarre series of break-ins. Because these weren't normal burglaries, the intruder often wasn't interested in taking the most valuable things in the house. Instead, he seemed interested in the house itself. Bedrooms, drawers, personal belongings, women's underwear, photograph, small keepsake. Some things would simply be moved around, and that's important, right? Because investigators began realizing that whoever was doing this didn't appear to be breaking into houses primarily to make money. He enjoyed being inside people's homes. And like that's the most violating feeling
It's
to like to
weird.
think
It
that,
really
right?
is. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. If you've ever had somebody break into your house before and just, I mean,
Hmm.
you feel violated. Like you feel,
Or someone's gone through your car
yes,
or any of those feelings. Yeah.
yes.
It's like a
Yeah,
dirty thing you can't wash off, right? It's just
exactly.
like part
Exactly.
of
Mm-hmm.
it's in your mind. So, like I was just saying to Billy, think about how violating that is, right? Imagine
Mm-hmm.
coming home tonight. Nothing huge is missing from your home. The television is still there. Your expensive things are still there. The drawers have been opened. Your bedroom has been disturbed. Personal belongings have been handled. Maybe something insignificant is missing. And then you suddenly realize someone wasn't just stealing from you, somebody was studying you. And that's the creepier part, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that burglar became known as the Visalia ransacker. So more than 100 residential burglaries were eventually to be connected to this period. 100. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
But then, like normal psychos, his behavior escalated. We're moving on to September 11th, 1975. A
Okay.
teenage girl named Elizabeth Snelling was asleep in her family's home. She woke to find a masked intruder in her bedroom. He attempted to abduct her. Her father, Claude Snelling, heard what was happening, and he came outside to save his daughter. And the intruder shot him. Claude Snelling died protecting his child. That gives me goosebumps, man.
Mm.
Ugh.
Mm.
And then the attacker escaped. Now, this wasn't just a strange burglar anymore. Someone had been killed, and police intensified their efforts to catch him. Months later, Detective William McGowan encountered a suspicious man during a stakeout. The confrontation turned violent, and the suspect fired at McGowan. The shot struck McGowan's flashlight, and somehow the man escaped again. Then something strange happened. The Visalia ransacker seemingly just vanished. Burglary stopped. Maybe he'd gotten scared. Maybe he'd been arrested for something else. Maybe he'd left town. Nobody knew. But about 200 miles north, another nightmare was beginning. So here we are in summer of 1976, Sacramento County. Women began reporting horrifyingly similar attacks. A man was entering homes at night, often masked. He'd wake victims from their sleep. He would bind them, blindfold them, threaten them, and then he would sexually assault women inside their homes.
Mm.
I'm not going to describe the sexual assaults graphically, but I want to not sanitize what happened either. These were prolonged acts of terror. Victims weren't just simply attacked and he left, they were psychologically tortured. He sometimes remained in the home for extended periods of time, moved through rooms, he would stop, eat food, he would leave the house, come back. Victims sometimes couldn't tell whether he was still inside the house. So imagine laying there. You're unable to see because you're blindfolded, afraid to move, you'd been assaulted, you're listening, you're trying to determine whether the sound you just heard was him, and eventually police noticed something else. This offender appeared to do his homework. Before some attacks, residents reported suspicious activity, strange phone calls, hang-ups, maybe a prowler nearby, someone looking in the windows, dogs reacting to something outside. Evidence suggested sometimes he had entered houses before the assaults actually took place. He learned
Mm.
the layouts, he identified escape routes, he appeared to understand where fences were, canals, trails, open spaces that could help him disappear. And this wasn't spontaneous. He was hunting. And that changed everything in the pattern again. At first, women were alone, were obvious targets to him. Then, which is, I hate this part so much, he began attacking couples. That should be have made things harder for him, but instead, he developed a terrifying method of controlling two people simultaneously. So here's what would happen. He'd break in, he would bind the man, all right? Then he would place dishes or similar things on the man's back. So what he would do is he would take plates and stack them up on the guy's back, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even a teacup on the back of his head. And what he would do is the threat was if I hear those dishes move, someone dies. I will kill you both. And that's how he would control people, right? So think about the psychological cruelty of that, Billy. You're lying there. Someone you love is being attacked in your own house and you can hear it. All right.
Mm.
Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to move, to fight, to help. But you know, if those dishes fall, that could trigger something even worse. So that wasn't just physical control, It was psychological domination, right? And Sacramento became terrified. People bought guns, people bought dogs, people changed their locks, neighbors watched neighbors' backs. Every sound outside mattered. People slept differently. Every strange phone call now was, magnified even worse. And every shadow near a window also mattered. And the attacker, he didn't stop. He kept coming again and again and again. And the police called him the East Area Rapist. And Billy, here's what I want you thinking. How does someone commit so many crimes like this and keep getting away over and over again?
Right.
How does he understand the police response times? How does he seem comfortable moving through neighborhoods? How does he know how investigators operate? So remember that question, because we're going to come back to that in a little bit, Billy. We move on to February 2nd, 1978. Brian and Katie Maggiore were a young married couple walking their dog in Rancho Cordova, and something happened during that walk. They encountered a man. They ran, they were pursued, both were shot and killed. Investigators would eventually connect these murders to the same offender, and then the geography began changing again. Onto Stockton, Modesto, Davis, Contra Costa County, even Southern California. The attacks weren't staying confined to one little pocket anymore, and neither was his violence. By late 1979, investigators were confronting something even darker. The predator who had terrorized Sacramento was evolving again. Couples were attacked in their homes, but now some weren't surviving anymore. December 1979, Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning killed in Goleta. March 1980, Charlene and Lyman Smith killed in Ventura County. August 1980, Keith Patricia Harrington killed in Orange County. February 1981, Manuela Whithune killed in Irvine. In July 1981, Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez killed in Goleta. And then, Billy, silence. Years passed. No one knew why. Had he died? Had he gone to prison, moved, decided to stop? And then, 1986, Irvine, California, 18-year-old Janelle Cruz was home alone. The killer returned. Janelle was sexually assaulted and murdered. And then he disappeared again, this time seemingly for good. Eventually, 13 murders, more than 50 sexual assaults will be attributed to Joseph DeAngelo, along with more than 100 burglaries. But remember, at this point, nobody knows his name is Joseph DeAngelo. There are different jurisdictions, different nicknames, different investigators, different eras, and computers aren't recognizing police departments the way they do today. They're not connecting things that people share with each other today. They didn't do that back then. The idea that the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the killer operating in California could be all done by one person wasn't immediately obvious to anybody. But evidence didn't care about jurisdiction. And eventually, like Billy said, science would begin putting pieces together that they couldn't have done back then. Now imagine you're one of the survivors. The 1980s end, no arrest. The 1990s arrive, no arrest. Then the 2000s arrive, still nothing. You've grown older, maybe gotten married, have children, maybe even have grandchildren at this point. And you've built an entire life around something you've never asked to survive. But somewhere in the world, the man who did this may still be alive, and some survivors received another reminder that he hadn't forgotten. There were reports over the years of disturbing telephone calls associated with the offender. In some cases, victims believed the man who attacked them was calling them again, years later. Imagine answering your phone and suddenly hearing something that takes you back to the worst night of your life. That's the part of the true crime statistics you can't communicate. We say more than 50 victims, but that's not 50 stories that ended, right? Those are lives that continued. People who had to try to sleep again, trust again, walk into dark rooms again, raise family, hear noises at night again, answer telephones, and somehow keep living. Meanwhile, the man responsible appeared to have simply vanished. And Billy, I'm going to give you a chance here. What do you think caught him? What would be your guess?
I have no idea.
Okay. Was it a witness? Was it fingerprints, a confession, a family member, or murder weapon even? Some trophy he kept? Think about it, because none of those are the answer.
Oh, no. Okay.
Now I'm going to tell you something investigators didn't know during the height of these crimes. While police were desperately hunting this predator, the man we know committed these crimes and experienced on the other side of the law. Joseph James DeAngelo had been a police officer. Let that sit there for a second for you. During part of this crime spree, the man terrorizing communities was himself a law enforcement officer. I mean, Oh, that makes me so mad. It gives me like goosebumps again.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had found out that D'Angelo had served with the Exeter Police Department from 1973 to 1976, and then with the Auburn Police Department from 1976 to 1979. So while investigators were trying to understand how this offender seemed so good at avoiding police, D'Angelo understood, policing, right? He understood
Right.
procedure. He understood investigations. He understood how officers thought and investigated crimes back then. And then in 1979, his police career ended. Not because anyone had figured out he was the East Area rapist. He was caught shoplifting. And among the items reported were a hammer and dog repellent. So with that, he got fired because of the shoplifting thing. And he was put on probation and he ended up getting fired. And so these things that I didn't put in the story, but I know from knowing so much about the story. So he used dog repellent on dogs. He knew that they were in houses. He would use dog repellent to make them sick, put them down, whatever. And he would also use a hammer on animals. Came to find out. So not knowing all these things about him at the time, the shoplifting, putting pieces together, that this is like, part of his kit that he had, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, he was fired, and yet nobody connected the fired police officer to the nightmare spreading across California. Decades passed. D'Angelo got older. He worked as a mechanic. He had a family. He lived in Sacramento area. The terrifying predator everyone imagined somewhere in the darkness was becoming an old man, and the case was becoming history, except investigators refused to completely let it die. For much of the original investigation, DNA profiling, as we understand it today, simply just didn't exist. I mean, think about that. Today, we watch crime shows and hear DNA like all the time, right? We assume, okay, they're going to run it through the database, find the guy. But investigators in the 1970s, they didn't have that world. It didn't exist. Biological evidence could be collected, stored, preserved even, but its future potential wasn't yet understood. The forensic science advanced, though. Investigators began testing old evidence, and DNA did something remarkable. It helped demonstrate the crimes committed hundreds of miles apart, years apart, under different nicknames, were connected. They determined that the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker weren't two monsters, they were one. But there was a problem. Having someone's DNA isn't the same thing as knowing their name.
Right.
Police could have the killer's genetic profile, right? They could compare it against other known offenders. But if the person they were looking for wasn't in the criminal DNA database, there's no match. So imagine having the killer's genetic fingerprint sitting right in front of you. You have it at your fingertips, but no name to attach it. It's like having a perfect photograph of someone's fingerprints, but no idea where those fingers belong to.
Right.
But year after year, they tried something and nothing. And by 2016, 40 years, Billy, had passed since the Sacramento attacks began. 40 years. The FBI and local agencies publicly renewed the hunt. There was a reward, publicity, old evidence, old memories, new technology, but still no name. Until investigators tried something that would change criminal investigations forever. The Golden State Killer was ultimately betrayed by people who absolutely had nothing to do with his crimes. So what does that mean? Investigators preserved crime scene DNA belonging to the killer, but traditional law enforcement databases, like we talked about, weren't given the identity that they need. So investigators explored a completely different universe of DNA. And I love this so much. It's genealogy. So think like ancestry type family research.
Yep.
People have begun voluntarily submitting their DNA to things like, where did my ancestors come from? Who am I related to? Do I have cousins I don't know about? And so these databases allow people to compare DNA profiles. And one of them was called GEDmatch, GED match. So investigators work with killers' DNA and search for genetic relatives, not necessarily the killer. Billy mentioned this a little bit in the story a second ago. His relatives. And that's the twist, because you and I share DNA with people, Billy, that we've never met before.
Right.
Second cousins, third cousins, distant branches of your family trees. Investigators found distinct genetic matches, but not a flashing screen saying Joseph James D'Angelo is the serial killer, right? Nothing remotely that easy. Instead, they got a couple pieces of gigantic genealogical puzzle, right? They started building family trees. And these weren't tiny trees. Investigators and genealogical researchers had to work backwards through generations of people, then forward again. Birth records, marriage records, family connections, locations, a huge web of people, thousands of possibilities. And then they started eliminating branches, right? Wrong age, wrong sex, wrong location, couldn't have been in California at the time, didn't match the physical description. until the enormous family tree started shrinking, thousands to hundreds to dozens to possibilities. And the one name became increasingly interesting, and that was Joseph James D'Angelo, a former police officer, right age, right geography, connections to the places and periods where the crimes occurred. So now investigators had something they had never had before, a name, right? But a family tree isn't enough to arrest someone for 13 murders. They needed to know where the DNA belonging to this ordinary looking older man matched the DNA preserved from the crime scenes years ago. So they watched him, and investigators waited for D'Angelo to throw something away. Eventually, according to records and reporting, investigators recovered discarded material, including a tissue from his trash. That's an extraordinary moment that they had waited for decades. Investigators had been searching California for a ghost, and now they were digging through an old man's garbage. They tested discarded DNA, and the results came back. The DNA was consistent with the killer's crime scene profile. The ghost officially had a name, Joseph James D'Angelo. And so this is where the theme gets interesting, all right? Because this wasn't his one tiny mistake that we talked about in the thing, like the tissue, the DNA. It wasn't really uploading his DNA because he didn't. He was the one something he did. It wasn't his relative deliberately turning him in. They didn't. It was forgiving. It wasn't forgetting about a surveillance camera. It wasn't leaving his wallet at the crime scene. His mistake had happened decades earlier. He left himself behind. Microscopic biological evidence at that time had no reason to imagine what science would be capable to do with it today. But many of these crimes occurred. Modern forensic DNA profiling didn't exist, like I just said. He could understand 1970s police procedure. He could anticipate patrol officers. He could learn neighborhoods. He could destroy evidence. He could hide his face. He could change locations. He could stop offending. He could wait. What he couldn't anticipate was the future. And he couldn't anticipate a world where an old crime scene sample could reveal distant relatives. He couldn't anticipate ordinary people voluntarily building enormous genetic family networks. He couldn't anticipate investigators taking those distant genetic connections and constructing a family tree. And he couldn't anticipate that a relative he may never have met could unknowingly help investigators point right at him. That's what I find kind of chilling, Billy. He spent decades believing he could escape his past, right? But his DNA had been waiting for the technology to catch up. On April 24th, 2018, Joseph James D'Angelo, at the age of 72 years old, was arrested. Police moved in. And imagine what investigators have felt spending years and years on cases. Some were working in cases that began before they were even police officers. Some of the original investigators had retired. Victims had waited decades. And now, standing in front of them was an elderly former police officer living in suburban California. Not a supernatural monster, not some criminal mastermind living underground. A man, a grandfather-aged man who had lived among everyone else. D'Angelo was arrested, and suddenly photographs of his face were everywhere. Survivors who had waited decades could finally look at a person accused of destroying so many of their lives. 2 years later, in June of 2020, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder. And as part of the plea agreement, he also admitted numerous additional crimes, including sexual assaults for where the statutes of limitation had expired. And let me talk about that for a second. There should never be a statute of limitations on rape. I'm sorry. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. There should never be a statute of limitations on that. It just makes me so mad when I hear about that all the time. Anyhow, okay. And during the proceedings, prosecutors described something D'Angelo had said while alone in an interview room after his arrest. He spoke about an internal persona that he called Jerry, but then came the words that cut through everything. He acknowledged what he had done. He acknowledged the lives he destroyed. For decades, investigators wanted the man behind the crimes to admit one simple truth. It was me. And eventually, he did. So in August 2020, Joseph James D'Angelo was convicted and sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole.
Good.
The Golden State Killer wasn't getting out. So, Billy, let's go back to where we started, right? A masked man slips through California neighborhoods in the darkness. He studies homes. He studies families. He learns escape routes. He terrorizes communities. He commits crime after crime after crime. And somehow he disappears. 1 decade, 2 decades, 3, on to 4. He becomes an old man. The victims become older. The investigators become older. Some die without ever knowing his name. I think that's so sad. Some of those investigators have worked
they don't
so
have closure.
hard. No. And somewhere in boxes of evidence, something microscopic waits, a piece of the killer himself. And the DNA, the technology, the family tree, everything follows him. They wait. He throws away a tissue. They retrieve it. They test it. And then more after 40 years, the monster has a name. The Golden State Killer is Joseph James D'Angelo. And that is one of the most disturbing stories. I remember when I'd hear, this is like the podcast I used to hear about it. This was before he was even discovered.
Right.
So even when they were recording these things, nobody knew who he was.
Nobody knew. Wow. Yeah.
Nobody knew at all. But one of the things, though, I didn't say in the story, actually, that stood out to me, I had to go back and find it. Let me see here. I wrote it down. Oh, so, you know, in the story, I talked about how he was attacking couples now. He'd go in, take control of the husband, and then, you know, do things with the wife. There was a community meeting about the East Area rapist, where a husband reportedly stood up and said he'd fight back if the rapist ever entered his home. About 7 months later, his wife was actually attacked and he was restrained. Same guy in the meeting. And investigators had whether that D'Angelo was there as a policeman that time in that room and heard him say that. He took it as a challenge. That is just
chill bumps.
disgusting. I know, right? Just the fact that he was there, heard this guy challenge him, and 7 months later, he went and took control of him and did those things. There's so much more to the story. If you guys are interested more in the Golden State Killer, just go to any podcast and search it. There are tons of them on the True Crime Podcast. You can hear even more details about. But I know that was a longer story, but there was so much to share in there, and I'm so glad that they finally caught this guy. And it made me think more about when I was talking about the people, the victims, about how people just had to learn to be in the dark again, like experience darkness, and what it was like just to answer a phone call without terror and just hear noises again and just try to live again with this big shadow of not knowing who this guy is. Is he still out there? Is he dead? Is he going to come back? And then, you know, some people got called on the telephone. So that's the Golden State Killer. And his tiny little mistake was DNA and his cockiness that got him caught.
Golly.
In a tissue he threw out. You have any other cases you think that we would be good to share with you guys? Please reach out to us. Let us know about it, Billy. Where can they hit us up at?
Yeah, go to Facebook. Join our community there. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, just join the conversation.
Please don't forget, if it's in your heart, to go leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us. I mean, not only do we hit 30,000 downloads recently, and that's without a lot of reviews and stuff. So we know if we had those, it could really help grow our audience and get the craziness out to other people about All Day Everything podcast. We really appreciate that. But thanks again for joining us this week for yet another amazing episode of All Day Everything podcast. We can't wait to see you next time. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, y'all.